Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about one of South Africa's greatest artists. Yeah, I'm talking about Johnny Clegg. Such a tremendous talent that we lost too soon in 2019. I always like to start these videos off by telling you how I got into the artist, and that's essentially I was at a record store and somebody was playing their album called Scatterlings, and a song called Scatterlings of Africa was playing, and it blew my mind because it was a group that mixed Western pop with traditional Zulu music and created this wonderful sound, this unique sound. Now, this was in 1982. This is before Paul Simon's Graceland album that sort of adapted a lot of those South African rhythms that, we're all very familiar with now. In fact, his first band, Juluka, had broken up by the time Paul Simon had released that album in 1986. So this was really my first introduction to that kind of music. I've always been into the idea of different cultures and hoping to experience the music and the joy that comes from each culture that sometimes seems to celebrate life a little bit more than we do here in America. Such a feeling of unity, and that's really what Johnny Clegg brought to music. In fact, all the music that Clegg did was really about culture as opposed to politics. Now, politics entered into it later on, because they were dealing with apartheid at that time, but we're not going to go into that. We're just going to talk about the music. And there's a lot of stuff that I can't pronounce. I can barely pronounce English, so I'm going to sort of skip pronouncing some things and maybe just flash words up on the screen. But let's go all the way back to the beginning. Johnny Clegg met a gentleman by the name of Sipho, and I can't pronounce his last name. I apologize. Lame's right there. And they formed a duo called Johnny and Sipho. And they put out a couple singles, but then they built a band around the two of them, and that became Juluka. And the first Juluka album came out in 1979. It was called Universal Men. And the thing about Juluka, it was a perfect blending, both Western and Zulu. The early Juluka albums maybe had more of an emphasis on the Zulu music. So there were songs in English and songs sung in Zulu as well. And Johnny Clegg and Sipho were an amazing team. And Universal Men came out in 1979. In 1981, out came the album African Litany. It's very unique. There's such a joy. I'm not going to pretend that I know everything that they're talking about, because they're dealing with stuff that I had no idea of at that time. I didn't even think that I knew apartheid existed until maybe a little bit later than these albums that I've just talked about. The Zulu stations wouldn't play them, nor would the Western or the white music stations play them. And so, they weren't selling a lot of records that way through radio play, so they made money by touring. But still, people were getting the albums, and they were really making inroads and starting to get noticed outside of South Africa. Now, the third album, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, came out in 1982, and that's a wonderful album. Now, the album that broke them in the States was actually released on Warner Brothers Records, and it is called Scatterlings. An incredible album. This is about the time where they started, singing more in English, maybe 60-40, 60 English, 40 Zulu. And, but still, it's wonderful because they're not leaving the Zulu behind. The rhythms and, the guitar stylings and the backing vocals, really unique, really wonderful. And this actually got played on like new wave type stations. I think the song Scatterlings of Africa actually was a hit in Europe. So they got a lot of attention there as well. Didn't get a lot of airplay here in the States, but when it did get played, they were the only band that sounded like it. And it was just absolutely wonderful. Now, the next album was called Work for All. And this came out in South Africa and eventually came out in the U.S. Now, this album here was actually known as Stand Your Ground in the States. Had a couple different songs on it, and the album cover was this album cover there. It was called Stand Your Ground. It was the second U.S. album on Warner Brothers, and it was yet another great collection of wonderful songs. Again, I'm a pop kid, so I'm drawn to melody. I love world music. But when it has, these great melodic elements, that's when I'm hooked. So Juluka, here is an EP called International Tracks. The cover is the Stand Your Ground album cover in the U.S. And Stand Your Ground had most of the tracks off of this album, but they added some songs off of this, such as Fever, Kilimanjaro, Look Into the Mirror. So this basically brings together those songs that were on the American album that were not on a South African album. And that's a great little set here. Now, oddly enough, I guess since that album didn't do well, Warner Brothers didn't pick up their next album, which is another album I can't pronounce. I've got the album title there printed on the screen. And again, wonderful blend of this great melodic hooks mixed with, this wonderful tribal Zulu vibe, sound, and, the backing vocals and the rhythms. Those themselves are what draw you in, along with the songs of Johnny Clegg. And like I said, both him and Sipho sing, and they sing in both Zulu and English. But this was the last Juluka album. And that was 2 years before Paul Simon made the whole South African sound popular here in the U.S. and internationally with the album Graceland. But Johnny Clegg continued making music. Sipho basically retired so he can spend time with his family on the family farm. And Johnny Clegg continued, and he formed a band called Johnny Clegg and Savuka. First album was called Third World Child, came out in 1987. They did a re-recording of Scatterlings of Africa, which was the biggest song by Juluka, but the high point of this album by far is the wonderful Asimbo Nanga, which is absolutely incredible. This is a wonderful album. This actually shows him veering even more towards pop. It still has the strong Zulu elements to it. It's more poppy than Juluka. And that, of course, continued with the next album, which was called Shadow Man. And that came out in 1988. This is, even moving closer to pop. Still, like I said, when you listen to it, those heavy, heavy Zulu sounds in there, all the influences that he took from Juluka into Johnny Clegg and Savuka, still there, but kind of like really super commercial. One of his most popular songs is a song called Cruel, Crazy, Beautiful World. And that is the title track of this album that came out in 1989. It's the third Johnny Clegg and Savuka album. Lots of great songs on it. Clegg as a songwriter, as a singer, top-notch, bar none. This came out in 1993, and it's called Heat, Dust, and Dreams, and that was the last of the Johnny Clegg and Savuka albums. Another great batch of songs. Now, more than likely, in your travels out there, out in the wild, you're probably going to be able to find the Johnny Clegg and Savuka albums easier than the Juluka, but I really recommend both artists. Absolutely fantastic. Oh my gosh, speaking of Juluka, Johnny and Sipho reunited Juluka, and they put out an album called Crocodile Love in 1997. And it goes back, closer to the Juluka sound, but it's still very modern. It has some like sampled rhythms but it's a wonderful album. It's great to hear them together again, and it sort of brings Johnny back to that sound that he started with Juluka. Crocodile Love came out in 1997, but that was it for Juluka. Johnny Clegg did not stop recording. He continued to record. In fact, he released his debut solo album, 2002. It's called New World Survivor, and it's a great collection. It's very intimate. It has modern rhythms, samples. It sounds like he's singing to you as opposed to with a group of people and he's singing to a stadium or something. This sounds far more personal, and it's a fantastic album. That came out in 2002. 4 years later, he released the album called One Life, and another fine Johnny Clegg album. Still using modern technology, mixing it with his classic songwriting and a mixture of different styles of music. Really wonderful. Johnny Clegg, One Life, came out in 2006. In 2010, he released an album called Human, and that is the album right there. Again, continuing great songs, modern production. When you listen to Johnny Clegg, he's never giving anything less than 138% of himself to his music. Really fantastic. Human came out in 2010. Now, I believe it was about 2016 that he may have been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So he knew he only had a little bit of time left. He did spend time going out on the road doing a farewell tour, but he also went into the studio and recorded one final album called King of Time, and it's wonderful. It's sad in many ways because this is an artist that still had so much to give musically, so much to say, so much positivity. The thing that I haven't gone into is the things he did for South African music and bringing cultures together. I'm just talking about the music here. I recommend you to go to the Johnny Clegg website or go to Wikipedia, find out about the man himself, and check out his music. This was 2017, his final album, King of Time. Johnny Clegg succumbed to pancreatic cancer in 2019, but there's still time to go back and listen to all this wonderful music. I have a couple compilations that I want to show you here. This one here is a budget compilation, for you that want to hear Johnny Clegg and Juluka and Savuka, but don't have a lot of money to shell out. This is a nice compilation here. It's a single disc, and it's got a lot of his most popular tracks with both artists. And there's another one I want to show you here. It's called Celebrating 30 Years of Johnny Clegg. Spirit is the Journey, the best of. And this is a 2 CD set, and it features solo Johnny Clegg, Juluka, and Savuka. It is a great introduction, an absolutely wonderful introduction for an artist that's had such a huge impact in the music industry, especially in South Africa. I really recommend you to check him out. But what I've done is I've put together a short medley featuring songs from Juluka, Savuka, and Johnny Clegg, just little snippets. A lot of these songs, you need to a time to ingest it, to feel it, to understand it, for it to have that emotional impact on you. But there's great hooks. So I just use a little segments. So if you like the way it sounds, I recommend you to search out more Johnny Clegg music. But before I say any more, let's give it a listen, and I'll see you on the other side.
Africa bukhala bangwele, Africa bukhala bangwele wema, Africa bukhala bangwele. Soy para les so oh here to what so abana baba oh here to what and from the scatterings of Africa the journey has begun. Oh mama, you'll just find their hungry eyes beneath the copper sun. Will this be the end of the rain and the birds? Who can send an emissary? Bye bye December African rain. The long long summer has passed and I hear the owls calling my name. Manalapo, mana, au lolo, mana, nansingaba. I'm sitting on the top of Kilimanjaro. I can see you tomorrow. I'm sitting on the top of Kilimanjaro. I cast away all my sorrow. Fever, fever, I'm walking through the night street. Fever, 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 I'm walking here. Revolution will eat its children. I see the river of dreams run dry. I'm so thankful I got to love you. You're the reason I survive. These are my father's people. This is where the human tree once grew. In my darkest hours, I sail away. Where she is, I must be every day. Leaving behind troubles, sail away. I sail away. Sail away.
Anyway, that's it for my video about Johnny Clegg. I highly recommend you check out the man online, check out YouTube, check out his website, check out Wikipedia, find out anything you can about this gentleman and this wonderful music he made with both Juluka, with Savuka, and solo. Wonderful talent. I appreciate you watching this video. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.